Hi, boys and girls. Welcome to our social studies lesson today. Today, let's start with our tribal land acknowledgement. We acknowledge the land we're on today is the ancestral home of the Coast Salish people and has been since time immemorial. We respect their sovereignty, their right to self determination, and we honor their sacred spiritual connection with the land and water. Remember, boys and girls, that we're on the coastal Salish people's land. All of this land belonged to them. And we respect their right to self determination. That means that we respect their right for them to self govern themselves and to take care of themselves. We honor this land that we're on because they used it for all of the things that they did when they're alive. They use the land to grow things, they use the water to fish, and lots of other things. Today, boys and girls, we are going to talk about our storytelling or oral storytelling, and you are going to begin your oral storytelling process. So, your job is going to be to come up with your own story. We have listened to lots of different stories over the last few weeks. We're going to go over a couple just right now. So we read How Daylight Came to Be, right, which was from the Skokomish, which is one of the coastal Salish people. And it was about the ant and the bear and how the day and night started. And we also learned that bears hibernate. We also listened and read Birds and People, that was a coastal Salish and a plateau story, and it was about birds and people and how that there's many kinds of people, and birds, but we all have similarities. Then we also read how the Milky Way got into the sky, and that was by the plateau people. There was a buffalo and a horse, remember, and they were racing. And we got to see the mane of the horse and the buffalo's mane. And do you remember that the buffalo and the horse, there was lots of dust. And at the end of the story, the dust went up into the sky to become the Milky Way. There were lots of different creatures and animals in that story. And there was also some geographic information because we know that in Eastern Washington, that in the summer it can be dry and it can be sunny, and that would cause all the dust to go flying up. So we have used this graphic organizer to help us tell about the stories and how they came to be. Now, today we're going to think about stories that we can create. In Kami, you're going to find this document and that you can put in there your information. But before we get to that part, let's think about stories. We know that all stories have a setting. We know that all stories have a beginning, a middle, and an end, and that all stories have characters and they have a problem. So let's think about that. All stories have a setting. A setting is where the story takes place, right? Sometimes it helps if I draw these things. So I'm going to just draw a little place. And just like on our graphic organizer for our Native American stories that we've been reading, right? There were places in that. It might have been they were all outside, but they could have also been up in the mountains. That would be a more specific place, right? They could also be on the ocean, like when we read Storm Boy. That could also be a place. So all stories have a place. I'm going to put up here. All stories have. So we know they have a place. We also know, if I can draw a jigsaw puzzle really quick, we also know, right, that they have a beginning. Do you remember that from all the stories we've read, even our mystery stories, right, that we've been reading? It has a beginning. We've talked about what we see in the beginning of a mystery story. We also know that they have a middle. And so I'm just drawing my middle part. And that's where we find out more about the story, right? We might see the problem here in the middle. We might find out the problem in the beginning. It just depends on the story. And then all stories also have an ending. And that usually tells us how, right, the problem gets solved. Okay, so this is the ending. So we have a beginning, a middle, and an ending. Now, the other thing a story has is characters, right? Sometimes our characters are people, like in the Huckleberry story, they were people. But sometimes they might also be animals. So maybe my story has fish in it, or maybe my story is about the sun, and the sun becomes the character, and we give it human characteristics so that it becomes the character. So these could all be characters in my story. And then, as we talked about before, there's usually some kind of problem. Now, in oral storytelling, right, the problem is usually something scientific that we need to be able to explain. And way back when, before science was developed, right, a scientific problem, right, like how did the robin get its red breast? Or how do the whale people, how were there whale people? Or how did the sun get in the sky? Those would all be problems that we can now somewhat explain through science, but they're things that have always just been that way. And so that's what we're trying to explain. So this is kind of my outline for my thinking. I need a place, I need characters, I need a beginning, a middle, and an end. Okay? So now let's think about what we can use for some ideas, because we need some ideas to be able to think about the different stories and what we might need. And so maybe some of my stories, hold on a quick second because I messed up. I don't know where I'm at. I am anymore. Oh, here we go. All right. So maybe let's brainstorm some different things really quick. I'm going to pull another piece of paper over here. So maybe, as I said, it's how the robin, which is a kind of bird, and it's the bird, if you look out in your garden, that has the red breast. So maybe one of my ideas is how the robin got his red breast, right? That's the stomach part of the robin, right? Or maybe my story idea is how the beaver, which is another animal, he's a really cool animal. He's the one that makes dams, right, to block the water in for his home. But how the beaver got his flat tail, that would be another interesting story, right? Tail, let me see if I can write that. Or maybe it's how the sun got in the sky, how the sun got in the sky. Maybe that's another story. Okay. But there's lots of different things that we can think of. Maybe it's another animal like the raccoon, right? I know that the raccoon has that really cool mask on his face. I don't know how it got there, but maybe you do, right? Maybe you can think of a story that would go along with that. Another one could be, oh, how the tiger's got his stripes. Now, that wouldn't go really with our area, but we definitely have beavers here, we have robins here, we have the sun here, right? But you could definitely do something like how the tiger got his stripes, right? And come up with that story. You could also think of other Native American stories, right? looking outside your window and thinking about the mountains or about the water or about rivers or lakes. How did they get here? So I want you to keep thinking. You can use one of these if you need to, but you can also come up with your own. So think away. Then as you're thinking, right, you're going to think of these different parts. Where is it taking place? Who are the characters? Is there a beginning, a middle, and an end with a problem? Okay. Now, in Kami, you are going to find this sheet, and this is your story planner. This says stories of how things came to be, planning worksheet. Your name will go up there, but you don't need to do that because it'll be in Kami. You need to write your title. What is your title of your story going to be? Who are the main characters? What is the explanation of nature? Are there other plants and animals in your story? What are the geographic or climatic attributes? That means things that happen in that area. So if we're thinking about something here, right, we could think about, is it taking place in the mountains? Is it taking place in the Puget Sound? Is it taking place in a village, right? Is it on the edge of a river or a lake? Okay, those would be some of the geographic or climatic attributes. And then we have main events of the story. I want you to outline and think about what happens first, what happens next, and what happens last, and then what your ending is. Okay? Now, your goal is going to create 5 pages, 5-page story. It can have 1 line on each page. That would be okay. It can have more than 1 line. Okay? But your page will have a picture and a line or 2 about your story, okay? And that is going to be due the end of next week, okay? We're going to have you turn that in as a Kami document next week. Right now, you're just going to do your planning part about what your story is going to be about. I think you're going to have lots of fun with this because you get to be creative and you get to really think about your story and what you want to tell us. Your teachers are all excited to see what you can come up with. Don't forget to do your story planner today. That is due today. And next week is when your actual story is due. And make it fun. Have a great time.